Imagine floating suspended in an endless ocean of absolute darkness, where a continuous glowing disk of orbiting frost stretches out magnificently before your eyes. If we were to look closer, this seemingly solid bridge reveals itself to be a staggeringly vast expanse that could easily swallow the entire distance between our world and the moon several times over. Sunlight scatters relentlessly through this majestic field of icy debris, painting the pitch-black canvas of deep space with a soft, ethereal luminescence that calls out in the night. Picture a delicate, exceedingly narrow ribbon of ice that absolutely refuses to obey the rigid rules of the cosmos, twisting and morphing exactly like a living entity. Deep within this highly active neighbourhood, unseen gravitational forces constantly pluck at the frosty strands, braiding them into a mesmerising, dizzying array of chaotic loops and kinks. This celestial structure remains in a state of constant, graceful motion, proving to the observer that even the most frozen environments are vibrantly and undeniably alive. Surprisingly, the breathtaking perfection we observe tonight is nothing more than a single fleeting frame in a remarkably long and slow cosmic film. What feels to our human senses like an eternal, permanent monument is actually caught in a high-speed state of transition, representing a temporary masterpiece destined to eventually fade back into the void. The profound knowledge of its impermanence makes the tranquil, silent beauty of this frozen architecture all the more precious and deeply hypnotizing to behold. Now, let the immense weight of these massive celestial bodies gently remind you of the comforting, familiar gravity holding you securely in your own resting place. As the quiet expanse of the night deepens gracefully around your bed, completely release any lingering tension in your tired muscles and simply allow your breathing to slow. You're safe, and these wonders are yours to inherit as you sleep. The tranquil journey begins millions of miles away, where a magnificent icy crown patiently waits to be explored in the profound and perfect silence of the outer solar system. Let your weary mind drift effortlessly outward, leaving the waking world far behind as our perspective approaches the awe-inspiring boundaries of the ringed gas giant. Stretching across the void, the main rings encompass a width that could comfortably fit the distance from Earth to our moon several times over. Stretching across the void, the main rings encompass a width that could comfortably fit the distance from Earth to our moon several times over. This magnificent expanse of orbiting frost forms a continuous glowing disk against the pitch-black canvas of deep space. Sunlight scatters through the endless field of icy particles, bathing the entire system in a soft ethereal luminescence that stretches for hundreds of thousands of miles. To comprehend the sheer scale of this phenomenon requires abandoning our terrestrial sense of distance and embracing the vastness of the cosmos. If a celestial highway were paved across the main rings, a traveller moving at regular highway speeds would take months of relentless driving to cross from the inner edge to the outer boundary. The rings dominate the local gravitational landscape, expanding outward in a majestic, silent sweep of frozen water and fine dust. Observing this immense architecture from afar, one is struck by the illusion of a solid, unbreakable bridge spanning the orbital void. Yet, this celestial track is entirely composed of independent travellers moving in perfect, synchronized harmony around the gas giant. The soft, continuous glow masks the reality of a space so wide it dwarfs the planetary distances we understand, establishing Saturn as the undisputed jewel of our solar system. Despite their immense breadth, the vertical thickness of the main rings is surprisingly minuscule, roughly equivalent to the height of a modest two-story building. This cosmic structure is a marvel of delicate proportions, a paper-thin sheet of ice suspended in the unforgiving vacuum of the outer solar system. A soft, continuous glow of sunlight permeates the frost, illuminating a localized environment that is staggeringly flat and mathematically precise. Diving into the ring plane reveals a ceiling and a floor that are mere dozens of feet apart, framing an endless horizon of slowly tumbling ice boulders. The gravitational forces of Saturn and its shepherd moons continually herd these restless particles, violently flattening any material that dares to stray too high or too low. It is a relentless, ancient physics engine maintaining a razor-thin equilibrium across hundreds of thousands of miles of orbital territory. If we were to stand within this frozen field, we would find ourselves in a crowded, shallow river of light and moving shadow. Looking directly up or down, the dark void of space would be immediately visible just beyond the thin veil of glittering frost. The profound contrast between the millions of miles of width and the mere feet of thickness makes this architecture one of the most extreme physical paradoxes known to science. Looking closely, the seemingly solid and continuous bands are actually composed of countless individual ringlets nested within one another. What appears from Earth as a smooth, uniform phonograph record shatters into a staggering complexity of thousands of distinct concentric circles upon approaching the planet. The soft, continuous glow of scattered sunlight reveals incredibly fine textures, where each narrow band dances to its own specific orbital rhythm. This microscopic architecture is a testament to the chaotic beauty of gravitational resonance, with tiny moons carving out thousands of miniature gaps and waves. Every individual ringlet represents a unique lane of traffic, where particles travel at slightly different speeds than their immediate neighbours just a few miles away. Some of these delicate strands are perfectly circular, while others warp and weave in elliptical paths that slowly process around the gas giant over time. Deep within the system, the sheer density of these nested tracks creates a mesmerizing optical illusion of depth and forward motion. The frosty material acts like a prism for the distant sun, refracting pale light through thousands of individual transparent walls of ice. The grand, singular rings we observe from afar are nothing more than a majestic chorus built from the whisper of a million independent frozen streams. The alphabetical naming of the rings from A to G reflects the historical order of their discovery rather than their physical sequence outward from the planet. This quirky nomenclature serves as a permanent record of human curiosity, mapping our gradual awakening to the full complexity of the Saturnian environment. As telescopes improved over the centuries, astronomers unveiled new layers of this frosty architecture, assigning letters as each soft, glowing band emerged from the dark. Consequently, the actual arrangement of the rings defies any logical alphabetical progression, creating a delightfully confusing map for the uninitiated cosmic traveller. Moving outward from Saturn's swirling cloud tops, a Voyager would encounter the D ring first, followed by C, B, A, F, G, and finally the vast E ring. Each letter tells a story of a specific moment in astronomical history, a quiet night where a keen eye spotted a new wisp of scattered sunlight. This historical timeline etched into the sky forces us to remember the generations of dedicated observers who pieced together this magnificent puzzle. The seemingly chaotic labelling highlights how scientific understanding is often built in fragmented leaps rather than a smooth, perfectly orderly progression. It stands as a beautiful reminder that the universe does not conform to human expectations or our innate desire for neat sequential catalogues. The brilliantly bright B ring contains the majority of the material in the entire system, creating a nearly opaque barrier to light. This colossal band acts as the visual anchor of the grand architecture, a densely packed metropolis of ice that aggressively reflects the sun's distant rays. Its overwhelming brilliance is fueled by a staggering concentration of floating frost, creating a soft, continuous glow that utterly dominates the local planetary environment. Within this crowded sector, the icy particles are packed so tightly that they frequently collide, gently grinding against one another in the dark. Sunlight struggles to penetrate this dense, turbulent layer, casting deep, shifting shadows across the billions of crystalline surfaces that make up its incredible bulk. If a probe were to attempt a straight crossing through the core of the B ring, it would face an impenetrable blizzard of frozen shrapnel. This central band holds more mass than some of Saturn's entire moons, representing a vast reservoir of primordial water suspended in a delicate orbital freeze. The sheer optical depth of the B-ring essentially blocks our view of the deep universe behind it, functioning as a magnificent glowing wall in the sky. It is the undisputed heavyweight of the rings, a brilliant testament to the sheer volume of matter trapped forever in the gas giant's embrace. Outward from the B-ring lies the Cassini division, a dark gap that appears completely empty, but actually holds its own faint, delicate bands. From the distant vantage point of Earth, this sweeping black canyon looks like a dramatic, empty void, deliberately carved between the two brightest structures of the system. However, the soft, continuous glow of sunlight scattering through the darkness reveals a hidden world of sparse, dusty ringlets swirling within the abyss. This deceptive emptiness is maintained by a complex gravitational resonance with the moon Mimas, which acts as a ruthless, invisible orbital bouncer. Particles that wander into the specific inner regions of the division are repeatedly tugged by the moon, eventually being forcefully ejected from the lane entirely. Yet, despite this constant clearing mechanism, enough resilient frost remains to form a ghostly, shadowed echo of the massive rings bordering it. Venturing into this vast division offers a brief visual respite from the blinding glare of the densely packed B-ring. The thin, ethereal bands here possess a muted charcoal-like quality, absorbing rather than reflecting the weak sunlight of the outer solar system. It is a quiet, meditative space within the grand architecture, proving that even the empty gaps of Saturn are filled with subtle, mesmerizing structure. The A-ring marks the outermost of the bright, easily visible main rings, ending in a sharp, perfectly defined edge that borders the deep void. This sudden, dramatic boundary looks as though it were cut by a cosmic razor, standing in stark contrast to the fading, diffuse halos found further out. A continuous glow of sunlight scatters off this final concentrated cliff of ice, highlighting a sheer drop-off into the pitch black of empty space. Surprisingly, the universe achieves this mechanical precision not through solid walls, but through the tireless gravitational shepherding of tiny orbiting moons. The small moon Janus, stationed just outside this boundary, exerts a constant invisible pressure that herds the straying frost back into the main collective herd. Any ice particle attempting to escape the A-ring is swiftly pulled back or ejected entirely, maintaining a boundary as crisp as a drawn line. This abrupt termination of the main ring system provides a breathtaking panoramic cliff edge for our hypothetical journey outward from the planet. Looking back toward the gas giant from this vantage point reveals the full, staggering width of the bright rings receding into the distance. It is the final, brilliant curtain call of the densely packed ice before the architecture transitions into the ghostly scattered dust of the outer regime. Far beyond the main system, the diffuse E-ring casts a vast, pale blue halo around the gas giant and its inner moons. Unlike the brilliantly sharp bands closer to the planet, this enormous structure is a ghostly, scattered mist of microscopic particles spread across millions of miles. The soft, continuous glow of sunlight interacting with these incredibly fine grains produces an eerie, sapphire luminescence that slowly fades into the dark vacuum. This colossal torus of frost is so incredibly wide that it effortlessly engulfs the orbits of several major Saturnian moons within its chilly embrace. Navigating through the E-ring feels less like crossing a physical structure, and more like flying through a sparse high-altitude cirrus cloud in the dead of night. The particles here are so widely separated that a spacecraft could travel through the heart of the ring for years without striking a single piece of ice. Despite its severe lack of density, the sheer volume of space occupied by the E-ring makes it a colossal planetary structure. Its pale blue aura serves as a gentle, whispering outer boundary to Saturn's domain, extending the planet's visual majesty far beyond the sharp edges of the main architecture. It is a breathtaking, ghostly crown that fades so gradually it is nearly impossible to define exactly where it finally bleeds into the interstellar dark. This ethereal E-ring is continually replenished by microscopic ice crystals erupting from the hidden, subterranean geysers of the moon Enceladus. Deep within the icy crust of this tiny world, a global subsurface ocean is squeezed and heated by immense tidal forces, driving spectacular cryogenic volcanism. Towering plumes of water vapour and frozen dust are violently blasted outward from fractures near the moon's south pole, escaping its exceptionally weak gravitational grasp. Once liberated from the moon, this fresh, sparkling frost is immediately captured by Saturn's immense gravity, stretching out to form the vast, glowing halo. The soft, continuous glow of sunlight scattering through the E-ring is therefore a direct visual signature of a hidden, alien ocean venting into the vacuum. Every sparkling grain of ice in this massive outer ring was born from the watery depths of Enceladus, painting the moon's liquid history across the sky. Without this constant, explosive fountain of new material, the E-ring would slowly dissipate and completely vanish into the dark abyss within a few million years. The moon essentially acts as a tireless cosmic snow machine, relentlessly painting its massive orbital path with the frozen spray of its own internal sea. It is a beautiful, dynamic, symbiotic relationship between a tiny, hyperactive moon and the grand architecture of the outer ring system. Viewed from a specific angle, the massive rings can disappear entirely from our earthly perspective due to their razor-thin profile. During the Saturnian equinox, which occurs roughly every 15 Earth years, our planet aligns perfectly with the exact edge of the grand architecture. When this precise geometry is achieved, the billions of tons of brilliantly glowing ice suddenly vanish into an invisible, infinitely narrow geometric line. This mesmerizing optical illusion highlights the extreme, almost incomprehensible flatness of the structure we have been exploring from the inside. The soft, continuous glow of scattered sunlight is completely neutralized when we're forced to look at the massive ring plane perfectly edge-on. It is a humbling moment for astronomers, as the most recognizable and magnificent feature of the gas giant is temporarily erased from the night sky. The periodic vanishing act serves as a profound reminder of how heavily our perspective dictates our understanding of the universe around us. For a few brief weeks, Saturn resembles a naked, ordinary sphere, stripped of its glorious, sprawling crown of ancient floating frost. Then, as the orbital dance slowly continues, the edge tilts, catching the light once more, and the grand architecture is miraculously reborn from the darkness. As this grand architecture is miraculously reborn from the darkness, the light reveals the true nature of its building blocks. Almost the entirety of this majestic system is composed of nearly pure water ice, frozen solid in the deep chill of the outer solar system. It is a staggering thought that this colossal glowing disk is essentially a cosmic glacier shattered into billions of independent drifting pieces. If we could reach out and capture a handful of this orbiting material, it would feel remarkably familiar to anyone who has ever held a winter snowball. This pristine, frozen water lacks the heavy rocky cores or dense metallic components found in asteroid belts closer to the Sun. Instead, the swirling lanes are a surprisingly simple, elegant masterpiece, crafted from one of the most common and vital molecules in the universe. Deep within this frozen quarry, the sheer volume of crystalline water is enough to fill our terrestrial oceans many times over. The profound simplicity of its composition stands in stark contrast to the staggering complexity of its orbital mechanics. Let your breathing slow as you consider this endless floating sea, locked in a perpetual freeze high above the swirling clouds of the gas giant. Exploring this icy expanse more intimately reveals a startling diversity in the physical scale of the frozen fragments. Particle sizes range dramatically across the sprawling plain, defying the illusion of a uniform, smooth surface seen from a distance. you might drift past microscopic grains of icy dust, only to suddenly find yourself dwarfed by a jagged boulder the size of a towering mountain. This chaotic mixture of scales creates an environment where a speck of frost and a floating city of ice share the same orbital lane. The smaller dust grains act like a fine mist, scattering sunlight and filling the empty spaces between the colossal, slow-moving behemoths. It is a surreal landscape of extremes, where the concept of an average size becomes entirely meaningless amidst the staggering variety of frozen forms. Navigating through this treacherous yet beautiful terrain requires a delicate understanding of how these vastly different masses interact in a zero-gravity vacuum. The gentle, muted clinking of frost-covered pebbles colliding in the dark provides a subtle, percussive soundtrack to the silent majesty of the mountain-sized chunks. This staggering variation in scale is the natural result of endless eons of shattering, clumping and grinding within the crowded orbital tracks. While the overwhelming majority of the quarry is pure, transparent crystal, careful observation exposes a faint, complex palette hiding within the white glare. A subtle reddish tint washes across specific zones, hinting at the presence of trace organic compounds mixed deeply within the frozen water. This delicate blush is not an impurity, but rather a vital chemical signature baked into the ice by the harsh radiation of deep space. These complex carbon-based molecules are the very same building blocks that form the foundation of biological life on our own distant world. Their presence among the sterile frozen debris suggests that the raw ingredients for life are scattered widely throughout the darkest corners of the solar system. The gentle radiation from the distant sun slowly cooks the trapped compounds, transforming them into these rusted, reddish hues over vast stretches of time. As you sink deeper into relaxation, allow your muscles to soften, feeling the weight of your body supported perfectly in this present moment. Imagine this faint, rusty blush painting a subtle watercolour across the vast canvas of the orbiting glacier. It is a quiet reminder that even in the most frozen, seemingly dead environments, the chemical potential for something greater is always softly brewing. This underlying purity of the crystalline water possesses an extraordinary ability to catch and throw back the light of the distant sun. The high reflectivity, or albedo, of these frozen fragments is exactly what makes the entire structure shine so brightly against the blackness of the void. Fresh, uncontaminated ice acts as a nearly perfect mirror, bouncing the solar rays outward and creating the brilliant beacon that has captivated stargazers for centuries. Compared to the dark, charcoal-like surfaces of typical asteroids or comets, this swirling debris field is blindingly luminous. Even the weak, heavily filtered sunlight of the outer planets is enough to ignite the entire expanse into a brilliant glowing halo. This astonishing optical property transforms a collection of dark, cold rubble into the most visually stunning phenomenon in our celestial neighbourhood. The sheer brilliance of this reflection serves as a protective mechanism, reflecting heat away and preserving the delicate frozen state of the water. If the material were darker and more absorbent, the gentle warmth of the sun would slowly sublimate the ice, causing the magnificent disk to evaporate entirely. Instead, the blinding albedo acts as a cosmic shield, ensuring the grand architecture remains solidly frozen for millions of years to come. Beyond simple reflection, the interaction between the solar rays and the translucent fragments produces a mesmerizing optical display from within the debris field. Sunlight filtering through the varying densities of ice creates a gentle, shimmering effect that cascades across the entire orbital expanse. As the thick clouds of frost tumble and rotate, they act like trillions of tiny imperfect prisms bending the light in endless, unpredictable ways. This dynamic illumination means the environment is never statically lit. It pulses and breathes with a soft, shifting radiance. Moving through a dense cluster of fragments drops the ambient light into a deep, cool twilight, only for it to flare brilliantly as the lane suddenly clears. The continuous interplay of shadow and refracted luminescence gives the frozen quarry an almost liquid, oceanic quality as the waves of light wash over the ice. Observing this shimmering dance induces a deep, hypnotic tranquility, much like watching sunlight dapple through the leaves of a dense forest canopy. The rhythmic strobing of passing shadows and sudden flares of pure white light provides a visual lullaby for the weary cosmic traveller. It is a soft, continuous light show generated entirely by the passive tumbling of frozen water in the quiet dark. Delving into the physical texture of these radiant fragments uncovers another surprising truth about the nature of this orbital debris. Many of the particles are fluffy and highly porous, resembling clumps of fresh snow rather than the solid, dense ice cubes one might expect. This delicate internal structure is a consequence of the incredibly low temperatures and the gentle, microgravity environment in which they slowly aggregate. If you were to gently press one of these snowball-like fragments between your hands, it would easily crush and compress into a fraction of its original size. These spongy, heavily cratered bodies possess incredibly low densities, allowing them to float and bounce off one another with surprisingly little force. Their porous nature also makes them exceptional shock absorbers, capable of surviving countless slow-motion impacts without completely shattering into microscopic dust. As you visualize these drifting, fluffy clusters, take a moment to notice the steady, calming rhythm of your own heart beating in your chest. The fragile, airy composition of the debris turns what could be a violent, chaotic demolition derby into a strangely soft, yielding environment. It is a cosmic blizzard where the snowflakes are the size of houses, tumbling silently in the deep freeze of the long dark night. Despite their soft composition, the sheer number of fragments within the crowded lanes guarantees an endless sequence of gentle, inevitable impacts. The constant slow-motion collisions between these icy bodies act to continually grind them down and reshape their physical forms over the course of millennia. This endless bumping and scraping serves as a relentless cosmic mill, slowly rounding off sharp edges and generating vast clouds of fine, crystalline dust. Because the particles are all travelling in the same direction at roughly the same speed, these collisions are rarely violent or explosive. Instead, they resemble the lazy, bumping progress of drift ice on a sluggish river, with massive boulders gently nudging each other out of the way. This muted friction slowly alters the spin and trajectory of the fragments, creating a complex, chaotic ballet of interacting orbits. The quiet, pervasive sound of this grinding process would be a soft, ambient crunching, echoing faintly through the solid bodies before being lost to the vacuum. This continuous resurfacing guarantees that the outer layers of the ice are perpetually renewed, exposing fresh, bright material to the distant sunlight. It is a slow, methodical erosion that shapes the texture of the entire system, one microscopic scratch at a time. This environment of continuous contact also allows for momentary alliances between the tumbling, snow-like bodies. Occasionally, larger chunks will gently clump together under their own minuscule gravity, forming fragile, temporary structures before eventually breaking apart once again. These fleeting unions are a delicate balance of orbital mechanics, where the tiny pull of a mountain-sized boulder temporarily overcomes the disruptive forces of the gas giant. These transient aggregates can grow into bizarre, elongated shapes, stretching across the orbital lanes like fragile bridges of packed snow. They drift in unison for hours, days, or even months, acting as a single, combined entity within the crowded traffic of the local zone. Eventually, tidal forces or a stray collision with another fragment will gently sever the bond, dissolving the structure back into a cloud of independent pieces. This cycle of temporary accumulation represents the very earliest stages of moon formation, continually starting and stopping in the freezing dark. The debris field is essentially a frustrated planetary nursery, forever attempting to build new worlds only to have them quietly dismantled by the immense gravity of the host planet. It is a beautiful, melancholic process of creation and destruction, repeating endlessly in the silent void. The constant interplay between breaking down and clumping together produces an unexpected side effect that preserves the system's stunning visual appeal. This delicate dance of aggregation and fragmentation keeps the orbiting material in a state of perpetual soothing renewal. By constantly hiding old surfaces and exposing newly fractured ice, the debris field maintains a surprisingly youthful and unblemished appearance, despite its potentially vast age. Let any lingering tension in your jaw or shoulders melt away, sinking your relaxation with the slow, eternal recycling of this frozen world. Without this active churning, the ice would quickly become coated in a dark layer of microscopic meteoroid dust, dulling the brilliant reflection that defines the system. The continuous shattering of the boulders acts as a vital cleansing mechanism, a self-washing cycle driven entirely by gravity and momentum. The result is an environment that feels simultaneously ancient and freshly born, a paradox maintained by the gentle chaos of the crowded lanes. Every fractured surface and newly formed snowbank is a fleeting masterpiece, destined to be unmade and reformed in the days to come. This endless cycle of renewal ensures that the grand architecture will continue to sparkle brightly against the darkness for as long as it exists. This pristine quality is not distributed equally across the immense breadth of the orbiting quarry, revealing distinct regional characteristics. The cleanest, most spectacularly bright ice is concentrated in the dense, central lanes of the system, where the sheer volume of material maximizes the recycling process. Here, the constant collisions aggressively scrub the fragments clean, creating an intensely brilliant zone that dominates the visual splendor of the gas giant. This gentle gradient from dazzling white to a muted charcoal-infused grey tells a story of the varying energy and density across the vast orbital plane. It maps out the chaotic, vibrant heart of the system versus its quieter, fading edges slowly surrendering to the void. This subtle transition of purity and light completes our understanding of the true nature of this endless orbiting glacier. This endless orbiting glacier is not left to wander aimlessly into the void. Tiny moons embedded within the icy gaps act as diligent shepherds, using their subtle gravity to corral the drifting frost. Like a smooth stone drawing slow, mesmerizing ripples through the surface of a quiet pond, these miniature worlds glide through the debris, establishing order amidst the chaos. Without these tireless guardians, the sharp boundaries of the icy tracks would quickly blur and disperse into the empty blackness. Their gravitational influence pulls stray particles back into the herd, gently nudging any wandering fragments into their proper lanes. It is a continuous, invisible herding process that keeps the vast lanes crisp and perfectly defined against the darkness. The presence of these small guardians proves that the magnificent structure is not just a passive cloud of debris. It is an actively managed ecosystem where the largest boulders have grown just massive enough to dictate the flow of the river around them. These shepherds ensure the breathtaking geometry of the system remains intact century after century. Deep within one of the wide, sweeping clearings known as the Enki Gap, a specific shepherd named Pan has claimed an entire orbital highway for itself. This moonlet orbits entirely within the empty space, quietly clearing a continuous path through the surrounding frost. As it travels, its gravity gently sculpts the adjacent walls of ice, creating perfectly parallel shores of shimmering dust. The sheer persistence of this tiny resident prevents the surrounding frozen material from collapsing inward to fill the void. It sweeps the lane clean with the efficiency of a cosmic snowplow, absorbing any stray flakes that drift too far from the established borders. Observing this isolated moonlet drift through its private canyon evokes a profound sense of solitude and purpose. Let the image of this lone, silent traveller gently clear away any racing thoughts in your mind, leaving only a quiet, open space. The smooth, sweeping motion of its journey provides a hypnotic rhythm, a steady metronome ticking deep within the frozen quarry. It is a lonely but vital patrol that maintains the stunning, grooved appearance of the outer tracks. Curiously, this endless sweeping has fundamentally altered the physical appearance of the lonely sentinel over millions of years. Due to the gradual, continuous accumulation of microscopic ring material settling gently around its equator, Pan has developed a distinctive and whimsical shape. The tiny moon closely resembles a classic flying saucer, sporting a massive raised ridge of packed snow around its middle. This bizarre equatorial bulge is made entirely of the very frost it is tasked with keeping at bay. As stray particles are drawn in by its weak gravity, they touch down softly, adding microscopic layers to the growing rim without shattering. It is a remarkable example of the debris actively building upon the shepherd, rather than simply being pushed aside. The resulting silhouette is beautifully peculiar, a strange walnut-like oddity suspended in the dark gap. This soft accretion proves that the relationship between the moonlet and the surrounding frost is a deeply physical exchange of material. The Guardian is literally clothed in the delicate dust of the flock it tends. Further out in a much narrower clearing, another tiny resident named Daphnis weaves a completely different kind of gravitational spell. As this minuscule moon glides through its restricted lane, it creates intricate vertical waves along the sharp edges of the bordering ice walls. Its gravity pulls the nearby particles upward and downward, forcing the normally flat plane to ripple like a ribbon caught in a slow breeze. These undulating patterns trail behind the moonlet in both directions, slowly dampening and flattening out as the distance increases. The passing of Daphnis disrupts the horizontal perfection of the system, introducing a stunning three-dimensional texture to the boundary. It is as if an invisible hand is gently plucking the strings of the icy tracks, sending deep vibrations through the frost. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your own chest, mirroring the slow, rhythmic cresting of these frozen waves. The delicate splashing of the particles against the edge of the gap is a silent, majestic surf crashing against an invisible shore. It transforms a simple empty lane into a dynamic, flowing testament to the power of miniature gravity. The true height and majesty of these vertical ripples are ordinarily hidden by the blinding overhead glare of the distant sun. However, during the rare twilight of the Saturnian equinox, the solar rays strike the frozen expanse perfectly edge-on. In this unique lighting, the towering crests of the gravitational waves suddenly cast long, soothing shadows across the sprawling, flat plains of ice. These dark, elongated silhouettes stretch for hundreds of miles, revealing just how dramatically the tiny moonlet has warped its surroundings. The contrast between the stark black shadows and the brightly lit peaks creates a striking, jagged landscape that seems to materialize out of nowhere. It is a fleeting, breathtaking optical revelation that occurs only a few times in a human lifespan. Watching these colossal shadows slowly drag across the frozen surface induces a deep, meditative calm. They serve as temporary sundials, marking the passage of the equinox with their slow, sweeping progression over the bright dust. Once the orbital angle shifts again, the shadows melt away, and the stunning verticality of the waves fades back into the brilliant glare. Moving toward the outermost boundaries, a pair of sibling moons engages in an even more complex method of celestial confinement. Prometheus and Pandora orbit on either side of a notoriously narrow, twisted strand of ice, performing a synchronized gravitational ballet. Their combined influence creates a tight, invisible corridor that forces the frosty particles to remain densely packed in a single, flowing ribbon. Rather than sweeping a gap empty, these two guardians work in tandem to squeeze the material into a concentrated, visible line against the void. The inner moon moves slightly faster, occasionally lapping its outer partner, which constantly alters the gravitational pressure on the fragile strand between them. This shifting tension prevents the narrow ribbon from diffusing outward and completely dissolving into the empty expanse. The precise timing of their orbits is a miraculous feat of celestial mechanics, a delicate equilibrium maintained on the edge of chaos. If either moon were to slightly alter its speed or distance, the tightly bound strand of ice would quickly unravel. They are eternal partners in a high-wire act, beautifully confining the most restless and chaotic track in the entire planetary neighbourhood. The inner partner of this duo occasionally dips dangerously close to the fragile ribbon it helps confine, with spectacular results. The localised gravity periodically reaches into the densely packed ice, pulling out elegant temporary streamers of frost known as gore features. These diagonal channels of drawn-out material look like soft, ghostly fingers reaching across the dark void to touch the passing moon. As the moonlet speeds ahead, it drags these delicate strands along with it, temporarily smearing the crisp edge of the narrow track. The stolen ice eventually falls back into the main current, but the disruption leaves a visible, chaotic knot in the otherwise smooth ribbon. It is a slow, mesmerizing theft of material that continuously reshapes the physical structure of the lane. Allow the soft, pulling sensation of gravity to anchor you deeply into your seat, relaxing your arms and legs completely. This gentle plucking of the icy strings ensures the outermost track never settles into a boring, static loop. It is a constantly evolving masterpiece of fluid dynamics, driven by the rhythmic, close proximity passes of a slightly erratic guardian. Beyond the immediate vicinity of the main tracks, much larger bodies cast their invisible influence across the vast expanses of floating rubble. A heavily cratered outer world orbiting hundreds of thousands of miles away uses a phenomenon called orbital resonance to carve out the widest canyons in the system. Because this distant body orbits exactly twice for every single orbit of the particles in that specific inner zone, it delivers a rhythmic, repeating push. This remote control landscaping demonstrates that physical contact is not required to sculpt the frozen architecture. The unseen rhythm creates a dramatic boundary between the brightest, most crowded regions and the quieter, sparser territories. It is a breathtaking canyon of shadow, dug out entirely by the invisible, repeating echo of a distant world. Stepping back to observe this entire ecosystem reveals a stunning interconnectedness between the massive gas giant, the floating debris, and the orbiting sentinels. The intricate relationship between the moons and the frosty tracks demonstrates a perfectly balanced, self-correcting cosmic clockwork. Every particle, no matter how small, is locked into a delicate mathematical dance with the larger bodies that patrol the void. If a massive collision were to temporarily scatter a crisp edge, the tireless guardians would eventually herd the stray fragments back into alignment. The system possesses an inherent ability to heal its own boundaries, driven by the inescapable laws of mass and momentum. It is an awe-inspiring display of natural order emerging effortlessly from a chaotic blizzard of shattered rock and frozen water. Amazingly, this web of influence extends far beyond the immediate neighbourhood of the majestic glowing disk. Even incredibly massive moons orbiting millions of miles away in the deep cold can exert gentle gravitational tugs that subtly influence the behaviour of the icy particles. These distant giants send faint, slow-moving ripples across the entire breadth of the system, like a heavy stone dropped in the centre of a vast still lake. These microscopic perturbations can travel for thousands of miles through the packed ice, slightly altering the density and brightness of the tracks. They act as a low-frequency rumble, a baseline harmony that underpins the more chaotic, localised dances of the smaller shepherds. It proves that the magnificent frozen halo is deeply connected to the entire planetary family, feeling the weight of every distant world. The realization that a body so far away it appears as merely a bright star can physically warp the ice beneath you is staggering. It weaves the entire local region of space into a single, responsive tapestry of gravity and light. This sweeping interconnectedness serves as the final, profound layer of beauty in an environment already overflowing with breathtaking complexity. Amidst this breathtaking complexity, the rings occasionally reveal ghostly apparitions that defy the orderly logic of orbiting ice. Mysterious dark marks known as spokes periodically form and glide across the broad, bright surface of the B-ring, appearing like spectral fingers stretched across a vast white plain. These features do not orbit at the same speed as the boulders beneath them. Instead, they sweep across the ring plane with a haunting, synchronized motion that ignores the standard laws of physics. From a distance, they look like charcoal smears on a brilliant porcelain plate, transient and unsettling in their sudden arrival. They can grow to be thousands of miles long and hundreds of miles wide, yet they possess no solid mass of their own. Watching their sweeping motion across the silent disk evokes a sense of watching shadows move across a moonlit tundra. This visual enigma remains one of the most mesmerizing sights for those who observe the gas giant's crown over long periods. It transforms the rigid mechanical tracks of ice into a shifting organic canvas where the rules of the cosmos seem to momentarily pause. You're witnessing a phantom dance occurring millions of miles away, a silent motion that creates a profound sense of scale and wonder. If we were to look closer at these shadows, we would find that they are not cast by external objects, but are formed by the ring material itself taking flight. These ephemeral features are actually composed of microscopic dust particles, levitated slightly above the main ring plane by invisible electrostatic forces. When sunlight hits the rings at a specific angle, it knocks electrons off the ice, creating a localized charge that repels the smallest, lightest grains of dust. This process sends a fine mist of crystalline powder drifting upward, where it hovers like a ghostly fog above the massive, slow-moving boulders. Because this dust is lifted away from the reflective surface of the main ring, it scatters light differently, appearing dark to an observer looking down from above. This levitated dust forms the spokes we see, a thin layer of atmospheric frost dancing just inches above the frozen floor. It is a delicate, weightless ballet of the smallest possible things, held aloft by the silent power of electricity in the vacuum. These microscopic particles move in unison, creating a secondary, ghostly layer that exists just above the physical architecture of the system. This electrostatic levitation represents a masterful interplay between the power of light and the fragility of the smallest grains of ice. Surprisingly, the appearance of these dusty spectres is closely tied to Saturn's immense magnetic field and the changing angle of sunlight during its long 30-year seasons. As the planet tilts on its axis, the interaction between the solar wind and the magnetic environment shifts, altering the electrical conditions within the rings. During the years surrounding the equinox, the spokes become most prevalent, appearing in thick, dark clusters that march across the B-ring like the gears of a hidden clock. When the summer sun is high, the electrical charge dissipates, and the spokes vanish for years at a time, leaving the rings in a state of pristine, unblemished brilliance. This seasonal cycle connects the microscopic dust grains to the global physics of the gas giant, making the rings a giant sensor for the planet's magnetic heartbeat. It is a slow, rhythmic transition that reminds us how the largest and smallest forces in the universe are often locked in a perfectly synchronized embrace. Take a moment to let your breathing slow, feeling the steady, rhythmic expansion of your lungs as you imagine the pulse of the giant planet. Notice the weight of your body settling deeper into its place, as steady and grounded as the magnetic poles of the gas giant itself. The universe moves in these long, slow cycles, and you are currently part of that peaceful, unfolding story. Beyond these electrical ghosts, the very fabric of the ring plane is constantly humming, with a different kind of structural motion. Spiral density waves ripple outward through the rings, functioning exactly like sound waves travelling through a cold, crystalline medium. These are not physical waves moving through water, but regions of high and low density that migrate across the disk in beautiful, swirling patterns. Where the wave peaks, billions of ice particles are squeezed closer together, creating a brilliant, glowing ridge of light. In the troughs, the particles are pulled apart, leaving a dark, translucent ribbon of nearly empty space. These waves travel slowly but relentlessly, turning the entire ring system into a massive frozen record player where the music is written in the density of the ice. The result is a series of tightly wound spirals that give the rings their iconic, grooved appearance from a distance. It is a visual representation of pressure and energy moving through a vacuum, a silent symphony of movement that never truly ceases. This structural vibration provides a sense of deep, cosmic order, as if the rings themselves are singing a low, silent note to the rest of the solar system. Interestingly, the universe orchestrates these massive ripples using the gravitational whispers of moons orbiting far outside the immediate ring system. These graceful spirals are generated by rhythmic nudges that occur when a distant moon passes a specific point in its journey, pulling on the ring particles at the exact same frequency over and over. This resonance acts like a gentle repeating push on a playground swing, building up into a massive organized wave that marches across the ice. Every moon in the Saturnian system contributes its own specific frequency to this process, creating a complex overlay of waves with different sizes and speeds. The rings essentially act as a giant amplifier for the gravitational whispers of the moons, translating invisible forces into tangible, beautiful patterns of light and shadow. It is a breathtaking example of how objects separated by millions of miles can remain in a state of constant rhythmic communication. Notice the quiet in your own environment, much like the silent void that carries these powerful gravitational messages across the cosmos. Just as the moons guide the waves of ice, allow the rhythm of this journey to guide your thoughts into a state of effortless focus. You're observing a masterpiece of connectivity, where every motion is linked to a distant, silent source. Deep within the outer edges of the bright rings, another class of ripples known as bending waves forces the ring plane to warp vertically in a spectacular display of three-dimensional geometry. This structure causes the otherwise flat disk to bend like a sheet of corrugated tin over distances of hundreds of miles. As these waves travel, they raise the ice particles miles above the average plane, creating a rhythmic, undulating landscape that captures the light in alternating strips of brilliance and shadow. The height of these waves is staggering, often reaching thousands of feet in a structure that is usually only the height of a two-story building. This vertical warping turns the rings into a topographic masterpiece, especially when the sun hits the peaks and leaves the valleys in deep shadow. From a high vantage point, it looks as though a giant hand has pleated the rings like a delicate glowing fabric. This verticality is another result of gravitational resonance, proving that the flat rings are actually a dynamic, undulating surface. It is a majestic, slow-motion warping of space and matter that defies our expectations of a simple, thin disk. Watching these waves roll across the frozen plain provides a sense of deep, heavy movement, like the breathing of a massive celestial giant. Embedded in the busier sectors of the B-ring, unique disturbances reveal the presence of hidden inhabitants that are too small to be seen but too large to be ignored. Propeller features are created by moonlets too small to clear a full gap, but just massive enough to leave wake-like disturbances in the surrounding ice. These features appear as small, bright wings that flank a central, invisible point, resembling the blades of a propeller caught in a frozen stream. The moonlet at the centre acts as a tiny gravitational anchor, pulling material toward it and then pushing it away as the tracks flow past. There are thousands of these propellers scattered throughout the bright rings, marking the locations of mountain-sized boulders that are currently in the process of growing into new worlds. They are the seeds of future moons, currently trapped in a perpetual state of transit within the icy river. Each propeller is a tiny localized pocket of chaos in an otherwise orderly lane, a sign of the hidden life within the machine. They drift along with the flow, creating their own private ripples in the cosmic sea. As you visualize these tiny propellers spinning in the dark, feel a sense of lightness in your own mind, as if you are drifting effortlessly alongside them. Notice how the constant shifting of these waves, wakes, and propellers means the ring system is never in the exact same state from one moment to the next. The transient canvas is perpetually being redrawn, as the orbits of the moons and the positions of the moonlets slowly drift over time. Waves collide and merge, propellers grow and shrink, and the ghostly spokes appear and disappear with the changing of the seasons. This fluidity gives the rings a living, breathing quality that belies their icy, frozen nature. It is a landscape in a state of eternal flux, a masterpiece that is being continuously refined by the laws of physics. If you were to take a photograph of the rings today and return a year later, the fine textures and specific patterns would have subtly migrated across the disk. In certain specialized zones, the interaction between gravity and varying orbital speeds produces a fascinatingly complex, ropey texture. Some regions of the rings exhibit a braided appearance, where the icy tracks seem to intertwine and knot together like the strands of a thick cord. This ropey structure is particularly evident at the chaotic edges of the system, where the shepherd moons pull the material into overlapping eccentric orbits. Instead of a single, smooth ribbon, the ice forms a series of intertwined loops that look like a celestial braid stretched across the dark. This texture is a visual record of the high-energy environment, where particles are constantly being accelerated and decelerated by competing forces. It is a beautiful, tangled mess of frozen water that demonstrates the sheer variety of forms gravity can create when the conditions are just right. The sight of these cosmic braids induces a sense of wonder at the intricate ways in which matter can be organized by invisible forces. It is a reminder that even in the vacuum of space, complexity and beauty emerge from simple, repeating interactions. Allow your focus to rest on this image of the braided ice, feeling the intricate patterns settle into your awareness with a soft, calming grace. Careful observation reveals that the entire system is vibrating with countless, overlapping harmonies of gravitational resonance. The rings are not a collection of independent particles moving in silence. They are a massive, resonating instrument that rings with the collective gravity of the entire planetary family. Every wave, every spoke, and every braided strand is a specific note in a grand, structural harmony that binds the billions of ice particles together. These overlapping patterns create a vibration that moves through the entire disk, a low-frequency hum of mass and energy that defines the architecture of the system. This structural music is what keeps the ring stable over millions of years, preventing the ice from simply collapsing into the planet below. It is a masterpiece of celestial mechanics, where every part is connected to every other part through the medium of gravity. As you finish this stage of the journey, feel the quiet harmony of your own body, a singular, peaceful system in perfect balance with the world around it. The vibration of the rings is a mirror of the steady, quiet pulse of existence, a reminder that everything is part of a larger, beautiful whole. You are resting at the center of a grand, vibrating symphony, perfectly still and perfectly at peace. Yet even as you remain perfectly still and perfectly at peace, you may find that the universe itself is in a state of constant, graceful motion. The delicate F-ring is perhaps the most active and changing region in this entire orbital neighborhood, constantly morphing its braided and twisted appearance. While the inner rings maintain a steady, stoic geometry, this narrow ribbon of ice acts like a living, breathing entity that refuses to settle into a static shape. This structure is composed of several distinct knotted strands that appear to wind around each other like the threads of a silver cord. Gravitational disturbances from nearby moonlets act as invisible fingers, constantly plucking at these strands and creating a dizzying array of loops and kinks. Watching the F-ring over the course of a few hours reveals a landscape in perpetual flux, where the very fabric of the ring seems to knot and unknot itself in the cold dark. Surprisingly, the universe adds a dramatic flair to this restless motion through the occasional silent violence of local interactions. Collisions between the F-ring core and stray moonlets create brilliant transient jets of dust that gently fade over a period of just a few days. These events occur when a small, wandering body of ice pierces through the main strand, dragging a long tail of fine debris behind it like a comet's mane. These jets can stretch for thousands of miles into the surrounding void, appearing as bright diagonal slashes against the velvet black of space. They represent a rare moment of direct physical contact, where the slow-motion choreography of orbits leads to a sudden luminous release of energy. The dust in these streamers is so fine that it catches the distant sunlight with extraordinary efficiency, glowing with a soft intensity before eventually dispersing back into the background. If we were to look closer, we would see that these features are essentially the scars of the ring, evidence of its ongoing struggle with the tiny moons that patrol its borders. As each jet slowly dissolves, it leaves behind a faint misty wake that contributes to the ring's overall braided texture. This continuous cycle of impact and dispersal ensures that the F-ring remains the most visually complex and ever-changing boundary in the entire Saturnian system. Moving inward from the brilliant main bands toward the massive sphere of the planet itself, the environment undergoes a profound transformation. The D-ring is so faint and tenuous that it is nearly invisible against the overwhelming golden glare of Saturn's upper clouds. This innermost structure exists in a realm of perpetual twilight, a ghostly veil of dust that occupies the narrow gap between the bright rings and the churning atmosphere. As you dwell on this image of the thinning ghostly ice, take a moment to notice the weight of your shoulders dropping and the gentle contact of your back against your chair. Feel the steady, unmoving support beneath you, providing a grounded contrast to the ethereal, floating dust of the inner void. You're safely anchored here, even as your mind drifts toward the edge of the gas giant's swirling golden depths. Within this nearly invisible inner territory, a silent and eternal process is currently unfolding that links the rings to the planet forever. Material from the D-ring slowly spirals downward, raining a gentle, unseen shower of ice and dust into Saturn's upper atmosphere in a phenomenon known as ring rain. This process is driven by complex electromagnetic forces that strip the smallest grains away from their orbits and funnel them along magnetic field lines. This constant descent represents a slow, graceful erosion of the system's innermost edge, as billions of ice crystals are pulled toward their final destruction in the warmer clouds below. The rain is so vast in scale that it significantly alters the chemistry of the planet's ionosphere, creating darkened bands that are visible even from Earth. It is a one-way journey, a silent migration of frozen matter returning to the giant that originally birthed it or captured it aeons ago. If we could see this process with our own eyes, it would appear as an endless, slow-motion meteor shower occurring across the entire equator of the planet. Each microscopic flake of frost contributes its tiny mass to the atmospheric chemistry before being swallowed by the immense pressure of the gas giant. This quiet downward spiral is the final act of the inner ring system, a beautiful and melancholic union between the orbiting frost and the world it crowns. Shifting our gaze to the opposite extreme, we must travel millions of miles away from the planet to find a structure of truly staggering proportions. The distant Phoebe ring is a colossal, nearly invisible torus of dark dust, tilted at a sharp angle to the main bright system. Unlike the icy, reflective bands we've come to know, this outer behemoth is composed of dark, carbon-rich material that barely reflects the sun's rays. This ring is so enormous that it could easily contain hundreds of Saturns within its hollow interior, yet it remains hidden from ordinary telescopes due to its extreme sparsity. It is a remnant of the distant moon Phoebe, a captured wanderer from the outer solar system that has been slowly shedding its dark skin for billions of years. The resulting cloud of dust forms a vast shadowy ring that marks the true outermost frontier of Saturn's gravitational influence. This structure exists in a realm of profound quiet, far removed from the bustling crowded traffic of the main ring plane. The particles here are separated by miles of empty space, drifting through the void with an ancient, unhurried pace. It is a dark, sprawling monument to the moon that created it, a silent sentinel standing guard at the very edge of the solar system's most complex planetary kingdom. Surprisingly, the universe reveals the presence of this dark giant not through reflected light, but through the warmth it carries. This massive outer ring was discovered using infrared telescopes, as its dark particles absorb the distant sunlight and radiate a faint, detectable heat into space. While it appears as a void in visible light, the Phoebe ring glows with a soft thermal intensity when viewed through the lens of a heat-sensing camera. This infrared signature allows us to map the true extent of the ring, revealing a structure that is far larger and more complex than anyone had previously imagined. The dark dust acts like a giant sponge for solar energy, trapping the meagre warmth of the sun and holding it against the absolute cold of the background stars. It is a hidden world of temperature and radiation, proving that even the darkest parts of the universe have a story to tell if we look with the right eyes. Notice the warmth of your own breath as it leaves your body, a soft and steady reminder of your own inner energy in this quiet moment. Just as the Phoebe ring radiates its gentle heat into the cold void, feel the warmth in your palms and the quiet pulse of life within your own frame. You are part of this grand, energetic exchange, a localized pocket of warmth and awareness in the vast, cooling expanse of the cosmos. The dark dust in the Phoebe ring does not stay put. It is caught in a slow, inward migration that has a dramatic effect on the moons it encounters. This dust slowly spirals toward the planet, gradually coating the leading hemisphere of the moon, Iapetus, in a thick, dark, reddish layer. This process has transformed Iapetus into a unique, two-faced world, with one half as bright as fresh snow and the other as dark as charcoal. As the moon travels through the sparse clouds of the Phoebe ring, it acts like a cosmic windshield, sweeping up the dark particles that lie in its path. Over millions of years, this accumulation has built up into a distinctive coating that absorbs more sunlight, causing the dark side to warm up and the ice to migrate to the colder, brighter side. It is a remarkable example of how a nearly invisible ring can fundamentally reshape the geography and climate of a massive moon. This slow-motion painting of a world is a testament to the interconnectedness of everything in the Saturnian system. A speck of dust shed from a distant captured moon travels for aeons before finally coming to rest on the surface of another, creating a visual masterpiece of contrast. It is a quiet, relentless process that proves even the most tenuous structures can leave a permanent mark on the face of the universe. In the vast quiet space between the main ring system and the broad sapphire E ring, another lonely structure traces its path. The G ring is an extremely faint, dusty arc that lacks the continuous circular structure of its more famous neighbours. It is a tenuous and fragmented feature, a ghostly ribbon of material that seems to struggle to maintain its presence against the vacuum. This ring is almost entirely composed of microscopic dust, which scatters light in a soft, forward-looking direction, making it visible only from certain angles. It represents a transitional zone, a place where the dense architecture of the inner system has completely broken down into a sparse and scattered mist. The G ring is the quietest of the named rings, a place of profound solitude and understated beauty. If we were to drift through this region, we would find ourselves in an environment of extreme clarity and stillness, with the bright main rings appearing as a distant glowing line on the horizon. The G ring does not demand attention with brilliance or complexity. Instead, it offers a subtle, muted presence in the dark. It is a reminder that beauty in the universe often exists in the gaps and the silences between the grander, more obvious spectacles. Deep within this faint, dusty ribbon, a specific feature acts as the engine that keeps the entire structure alive. A distinct bright arc within the G ring contains a collection of relatively large ice boulders that constantly generate new dust as they softly collide. These boulders, some the size of large buildings, are trapped in a specific orbital trap that keeps them clumped together in a single, dense segment of the ring. As these boulders grind against each other in their slow-motion dance, they shed a continuous supply of fresh, microscopic frost into the surrounding space. This dust is then spread out by the planet's magnetic field, forming the much larger and fainter G ring that we see from a distance. The bright arc is the hidden heart of the ring, a localized factory of ice that ensures the G-ring does not simply fade away into nothingness. This process is a miniaturized version of the recycling seen in the larger rings, but occurring in a much more isolated and fragile environment. It highlights the persistence of the system, where a few lucky boulders can sustain a massive glowing arc for millions of years. Watching this small cluster of ice navigate the dark void provides a sense of the incredible resilience and self-sustaining nature of the cosmos. Reflecting on these extreme inner and outer regions highlights the incredibly varied and peaceful environments that exist within a single planetary system. From the light-drowned, rainy depths of the D-ring to the frozen, heat-radiating vastness of the Phoebe ring, the Saturnian system is a collection of distinct and specialized worlds. Each zone has its own unique rules, its own specific light, and its own rhythmic pulse of life and decay. The grand architecture of Saturn is not just a single object, but a complex tapestry of interacting forces that span millions of miles of empty space. It is a place where electricity levitates dust, gravity carves canyons, and moonlight paints the faces of distant worlds. This diversity is what makes the ring so endlessly fascinating, offering a lifetime of discovery within a single spectacular orbital plane. The fascinations of this spectacular orbital plane are governed by a rhythm so slow it challenges our human perception of time and duration. Because the gas giant takes nearly 30 Earth years to complete a single journey around the Sun, its seasons are incredibly long, slow, and dramatic. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter do not pass in months, but in vast stretches of years, allowing atmospheric and orbital changes to unfold with a meditative patience. This leisurely pace means that the shadows creeping across the rings move with a glacial grace, transforming the landscape over decades rather than days. A child born during the start of a Saturnian summer would be nearly an adult by the time the first hints of autumn began to cool the northern hemisphere. It is a world where time itself seems to dilate, stretching every sunset and every seasonal shift into a grand, multi-year performance. Deep within this slowed-down reality, the rings witness transitions that are invisible to those trapped in the frantic pace of shorter orbits. The gradual tilt of the planet is a heavy, purposeful motion that reshapes the lighting of millions of miles of ice over the course of decades. Within this immense span of time, you can find a unique stillness, a sense that the universe is in no hurry to finish its work. Surprisingly, the universe offers a moment of profound transformation during the equinox, when the sun strikes the rings exactly edge-on. This rare alignment plunges the entire system into a deep, freezing twilight as the direct rays of the sun no longer illuminate the broad faces of the icy disk. The brilliant glowing expanse that usually dominates the sky suddenly narrows into a thin, dark line, barely catching the light. As the light fades, the vibrant colours and textures of the rings are replaced by a muted monochromatic palette of deep violets and charcoal greys. This period of dimming represents a celestial pause, a brief interval in the 30-year cycle where the massive architecture seems to hold its breath. The silence of the void feels heavier during this transition, as the primary source of energy and visibility is reduced to a sliver of its former self. If we were to look closer, we would see the billions of ice particles entering a state of collective shadow, shielded from the sun by their own neighbours. This edge-on perspective creates a world where depth is more important than breadth, and the thinness of the rings becomes their most striking feature. It is a time of secrets and hidden details, where the familiar brilliance of the planet's crown is traded for a more intimate, shadowy beauty. This unique lighting angle reveals vertical structures that are normally invisible, casting long shadows across the otherwise flat expanse. Peaks and ridges that rise only a few kilometers above the ring plane, normally lost in the overhead glare, suddenly become the stars of the show. These vertical disturbances, created by the gravitational tugs of moons like Daphne's, cast silhouettes that stretch for hundreds of miles across the dusty plains. The effect is like watching an endless afternoon turn gracefully to dusk, where every tiny imperfection in the ice is magnified into a dramatic dark landmark. These shadows crawl across the rings with a creeping meditative motion, marking the passage of the equinox with their slowly lengthening forms. What was once a featureless sheet of light is transformed into a jagged topographical masterpiece of high peaks and deep valleys. Deep within these elongated shadows, the physical reality of the rings becomes a study in extreme thermal isolation. Temperatures in the shadowed portions of the rings can drop to an astonishingly cold -380 degrees Fahrenheit. Without the constant warming touch of sunlight, the frozen water particles lose their meagre heat almost instantly, radiating it away into the absolute cold of deep space. The ice boulders become brittle and silent in this profound chill, their crystalline structures tightening as the last vestiges of thermal energy vanish. This deep freeze environment represents one of the coldest places in the entire solar system, a domain where movement is minimal and the airless void is a perfect insulator of cold. It is a landscape of frozen perfection, preserved in a state of absolute stasis, until the slow-moving sun finally returns to the horizon. Watching the boundary between light and shadow is like watching a wall of ice being built in real time. On one side, the sun-drenched particles maintain a modest warmth, while just inches away in the dark, the temperature plummets toward the floor of physics. This extreme contrast highlights the fragility of warmth in the outer solar system, where life-giving energy is a precious and fleeting gift. Notice how the equinox also temporarily alters the electrical environment of the rings, changing how the microscopic dust interacts with the magnetic field. As the sun's rays hit the rings edge-on, the photoelectric effect that usually keeps the dust levitated is drastically reduced. Without this constant shower of photons to knock electrons loose, the electrostatic charge that forms the ghostly spokes begins to shift and dissipate. This change in charge creates a different kind of orbital weather, where the smallest grains of ice and dust are no longer suspended in high, dusty clouds but settle back toward the main ring plane. The magnetic field of Saturn, usually a guiding force for these charged particles, finds less grip on the neutral dust during the twilight months. It is a period of electrical calm, a momentary grounding of the restless atmosphere that usually hovers above the frozen boulders. This invisible shift in energy demonstrates how even the largest planetary structures are susceptible to the subtle changes in lighting and radiation. The rings are not just a collection of rocks, they are a massive interconnected electrical circuit that responds to the slow tilt of the planet. As the charge fades, the rings return to a more basic mechanical state, waiting for the return of the sun to reignite their atmospheric dance. As the seasons naturally progress beyond the equinox, the tilt of the rings slowly exposes more of their icy surface to the warming rays of the distant sun. Over the course of 7 Earth years, the rings transition from a thin, dark line back into a wide, brilliant disk as the solar elevation increases. This gradual opening of the rings is like a slow-motion fan being unfolded against the backdrop of the stars, revealing the full glory of the system once again. This increasing exposure brings life back to the frozen landscape, as the sun begins to penetrate deeper into the layers of ice and dust. The hidden colours of the organic compounds begin to glow once more, and the shadows of the vertical structures shrink back into the glare of midday. It is a long, slow awakening that brings a sense of renewal to the billions of individual ice fragments orbiting the gas giant. Surprisingly, this tilt also affects the visibility of the rings from our own perspective on Earth. We watch as the rings go from being invisible to being the dominant feature of the planet, a slow-motion transformation that has been observed by astronomers for centuries. This seasonal rhythm is the heartbeat of the Saturnian system, a steady, predictable pulse that guides the evolution of its frozen crown. If we were to look closer, we would see that this changing illumination causes the rings to act like a giant reflective cooling system for the swirling atmosphere of the planet below. When the rings are tilted at their maximum angle, they intercept a significant portion of the sunlight that would otherwise strike Saturn's equator. The immense field of ice acts as a planetary parasol, casting a wide, cool shadow that can lower the temperature of the upper atmosphere by several degrees. This shade affects the weather patterns on the planet, influencing the strength of the winds and the formation of the massive swirling storms that define Saturn's face. The rings are essentially a thermodynamic regulator, a massive piece of climate control machinery that functions purely through their physical presence. It is a stunning example of how a planet's orbital features can fundamentally alter its own internal meteorology. Notice the air around you, feeling the subtle temperature of the room and the quiet movement of the atmosphere as you breathe. Just as the rings cool the giant planet, allow your own internal environment to reach a state of cool, calm equilibrium. You're observing a system where the smallest tilt of a ring can change the weather of a world, a delicate balance of energy and shadow. This structure of light and dark is further defined by the shadow of Saturn itself, which falls heavily across the rings. As the ice particles orbit the planet, they must periodically pass through this immense conical void where the sun's rays are completely blocked. This crossing is not a gradual fade, but a sudden plunge into a star-studded blackness that lasts for hours at a time. This shadow is so vast that it can swallow entire sections of the A and B rings, creating a dark gap in the otherwise continuous circles of light. For the particles inside, the planet becomes a massive dark wall that occults the sun, leaving only the distant stars and the faint glow of Saturn shine to illuminate the ice. It is a place of profound isolation, where the rest of the solar system is momentarily erased by the bulk of the gas giant. The boundary of this shadow is a site of extreme physical transitions, where the energy of the sun is abruptly cut off. This sharp line of demarcation is a visual reminder of the planet's dominance over its environment, a heavy hand of shadow laid across the delicate ice. It creates a rhythmic cycle of day and night for every single boulder in the system, a repetitive sequence that has occurred billions of times. Imagine the particles entering the planet's shadow experiencing a sudden, extreme drop in temperature, only to warm back up gently hours later upon exiting. This rapid thermal cycling acts as a rhythmic stressor on the ice, causing the outer layers of the boulders to expand and contract with every orbit. Over the course of millions of years, this thermal fatigue can cause the ice to crack and flake, contributing to the fine dust that populates the gaps. The transition from the sun-drenched day to the deep freeze night happens in a matter of minutes, a shock to the crystalline structure of the frozen water. Then, as the particle emerges on the other side of the planet, the first rays of the sun bring a sudden, violent return of thermal energy. This constant expansion and contraction is a silent, microscopic grinding that works alongside the physical collisions to shape the ring material. Deep within this cycle, you can find a metaphor for the resilience of the system, which survives these extreme swings in temperature every few hours. The ice remains solid and reflective despite the constant thermal battering, held together by the cold of the outer void. It is a resilient, enduring architecture that has found a way to thrive in a world of absolute extremes. Surprisingly, this eternal cycle of freezing and subtle thawing affects the long-term structural integrity of the billions of individual ice boulders. While the water never truly melts in the traditional sense, the constant temperature fluctuations influence how the ice clumps together and how it breaks apart. The thermal stress helps to regulate the size of the particles, preventing them from growing too large or becoming too fine. The structural health of the rings is therefore tied directly to the seasons and the shadows of the planet. Over millions of years, these thermal cycles act as a refining force, ensuring that the ring material remains in a state of high albedo, crystalline purity. It is a slow-motion polishing of the system, a maintenance routine performed by the sun and the shadows themselves. The symphony of colours, sensory focus, a gentle, slow-motion gradient of pastel pink, turning seamlessly into a muted, pale ivory. The long, slow rhythm of the cosmic year eventually reveals that the brilliant white crown is far more complex than a simple sheet of ice. While appearing mostly white to the naked eye, enhanced imaging reveals a subtle, banded tapestry of soft colours woven across the immense ring plane. This hidden spectrum emerges as a gentle, slow-motion gradient of pastel pink, turning seamlessly into a muted pale ivory, a chromatic whisper that only reveals itself to the most patient observers. It is a visual journey that rewards the steady gaze, where the blinding glare of the sun is softened into a palette of ethereal, desert-like tones. Deep within these bands, the variations in shade suggest a rich and varied chemical makeup that defies the monolithic appearance of the rings from afar. The colours are not bold or garish, but rather a series of delicate washes that transition with the fluidity of a watercolour painting drying in the sun. This visual symphony provides a secondary layer of beauty, one that requires specialised eyes and spectral filters to truly appreciate the intricate details of the Saturnian crown. As you drift through this field of colour, the transition from one shade to the next feels as natural and inevitable as the shifting of light across a quiet landscape at dawn. Surprisingly, the universe uses the very light of the sun to paint these delicate pink and red hues onto the frozen canvas. These warmer tones are thought to be caused by complex organic molecules called tholins, which are created when ultraviolet sunlight strikes the simple hydrocarbons found within the ice. This slow-motion alchemy transforms basic building blocks into a sophisticated chemical dye that stains the rings with the colours of a terrestrial sunset. It is a quiet, continuous process that turns the cold architecture of the rings into a vibrant record of solar interaction. The process occurs over immense timescales as the constant bombardment of solar radiation breaks and reforms molecular bonds within the crystalline frost. These tholins are the same reddish substances found on the surfaces of distant moons and icy worlds across the outer solar system, linking the rings to a broader chemical family. The result is a soft, rosy glow that emanates from the heart of the system, a signature of the sun's long-term influence on the frozen water. This organic staining acts as a bridge between the sterile vacuum of space and the complex chemistry that can lead to life. If we were to look closer, we would see that these molecules are not just a coating, but are deeply integrated into the structural matrix of the ice boulders. They represent a record of solar exposure, a visual clock that tracks how long each particle has been basking in the weak, distant rays. This organic staining adds a sense of warmth and vitality to the otherwise cold and sterile environment of the orbiting quarry. It turns the rings into a dynamic laboratory, where the light of a star acts as the primary reactant in a slow, silent chemical dance. Tiny amounts of iron oxide, essentially a form of cosmic rust, may also contribute to the warmer tones seen in specific isolated ringlets. This mineral dust, likely delivered by ancient collisions or captured meteoroids, introduces a grounded metallic quality to the ethereal pastel pinks of the tholins. The presence of iron provides a stark contrast to the purity of the surrounding water ice, acting as a gritty pigment in a world of crystalline frost. It is a subtle infusion of planetary substance into the gaseous and icy domain of the outer rings. This subtle infusion of rust creates a palette that feels ancient and weathered, a testament to the billions of years the system has spent interacting with its environment. The iron particles are scattered so thinly that they never overwhelm the primary colours, but instead provide a deep, complex base that enriches the overall visual texture. It is a reminder that even in the highest reaches of the atmosphere, the raw elements of a planetary core can find a way to manifest. This metallic dusting adds a sense of weight and history to the floating glacier, anchoring its beauty in the physical reality of the solar system. As you drift through this narrative, take a moment to notice the stillness of your own hands and the quiet, steady rhythm of your breathing. Just as the rings hold their iron and organic dyes in a perfect frozen equilibrium, feel the balanced state of your own body as it rests in this space. You are perfectly supported, a calm observer of a chemical symphony that has been playing for aeons in the deep cold. Let the transition from pastel pink to muted ivory settle over you, bringing a sense of deep and lasting tranquility. Deep within the colour-coded bands, this variation provides a roadmap to the age and origin of the material, offering a window into the deep history of the planet. Purer white ice typically indicates newer or shielded surfaces, where the fresh, unblemished crystal has not yet been stained by the slow accumulation of cosmic dust or organic dyes. In contrast, the deeper, more complex colours mark the ancient veterans of the system, particles that have endured millions of years of exposure to the harsh environment of space. It is a visual census of the ring population, mapping the journey of every icy fragment. By tracing these transitions from brilliant ivory to muted peach, we can identify where new material is being injected into the system and where the old guard remains. This colour-coded history allows us to see the rings as a dynamic, evolving structure rather than a static monument. The hues act as a silent record, capturing the stories of countless collisions, moon-shredding events, and the slow, steady rain of interstellar debris. It transforms the vast disk into a living document of celestial activity, written in the language of light and colour. Ultraviolet observations reveal that specific regions, particularly the outer sections of the A-ring, are incredibly rich in pure water ice compared to other areas, while the inner regions may be more contaminated by dust and organics. This outer frontier maintains a startling level of cleanliness that defies its exposure to the void. This purity gives the edge of the main system a unique, high-energy signature that sparkles with an intense crystalline clarity in the invisible spectrum. It is a final, brilliant declaration of water and light before the system fades into the dark. This localized cleanliness suggests that the A-ring is a place of active renewal, perhaps due to the frequent collisions and shepherding actions of the nearby moons. The constant grinding and recycling of the ice boulders ensures that fresh, uncontaminated surfaces are always being turned toward the sun. It creates a stark boundary where the chemical noise of the rest of the system falls away, leaving only the pure, resonant signal of frozen water. This region acts as a pristine reservoir, a clean edge to the grand architecture that borders the empty expanse. If we were to look closer at this ultraviolet brilliance, we would find an environment that feels exceptionally sharp and well-defined. The lack of contaminants means the ice reflects light with a surgical precision, creating a zone of high contrast beauty at the very edge of the bright architecture. It represents the purest expression of the ring's fundamental nature, a shimmering crown of frozen crystal that defies the darkening effects of space. This purity is a testament to the dynamic forces that keep the rings young and vibrant, even after millions of years. In stark contrast to the brilliant purity of the main bands, the Cassini division appears darker and redder because it contains a much lower concentration of bright ice. This gap is not truly empty, but is instead populated by a sparse collection of particles that are heavily enriched with microscopic contaminants and carbon-rich dust. Without the dense, self-cleaning collisions of the major rings, these particles have become deeply stained over millions of years, taking on the appearance of dark, weathered charcoal. It is a place where the system's debris gathers, creating a shadowed canyon between the walls of light. Notice the deep, heavy silence that seems to emanate from this dark gap as you visualize its charcoal-colored bands. Your own state of relaxation is like this quiet space, a calm interval between the more active and brilliant thoughts of your day. Just as the Cassini division holds its own unique character within the grand architecture, allow yourself to find peace in the quiet spaces of your own awareness. You're observing a masterpiece of balance, where darkness and light exist in a perfect and eternal harmony. Meteoroid impacts continually deliver carbon-rich dust to the system, acting as a slow, cosmic tint that gradually alters the appearance of the rings over millions of years. Every time a tiny pebble from the outer solar system strikes an ice boulder, it leaves behind a microscopic splash of dark, rocky material. This relentless bombardment functions like a slow-motion airbrush, systematically dirtying the pristine white ice with a fine layer of interstellar soot. It is a silent, inevitable transformation that connects the rings to the broader chemistry of the Milky Way. This process is universal across the entire breadth of the system, but its effects are most visible in the regions where the ice is less dense and the traffic is slower. The carbon dust acts as a darkening agent, reducing the overall albedo and muting the brilliant reflections of the water crystals. Over geological timescales, this accumulation could potentially turn the entire system into a dark, charcoal-like disk if it were not for the self-cleansing processes of fragmentation and renewal. This cosmic tint is a reminder that even the most isolated structures are constantly interacting with the larger universe. Deep within this cosmic tint lies the secret to distinguishing between the different ages and origins of the various ringlets. The darker the ring, the longer it has likely been exposed to this steady rain of carbon-rich debris from the distant stars. It is a slow, methodical process that turns the rings into a sensitive detector for the environment of the outer solar system. This staining ties the fate of the ice to the history of the galaxy, creating a tapestry that is as much about the void as it is about the planet. The rate at which the rings are accumulating this carbon-rich dust helps scientists estimate exactly how long they have been exposed to the environment of space. By measuring the current pollution levels in the ice and comparing them to the known density of meteoroids in the outer solar system, we can calculate a chemical age for the entire structure. This cosmic bookkeeping suggests that the rings are not nearly as old as the planet itself, but may be a relatively recent addition to the Saturnian system. It is a startling realization that changes our entire perspective on the gas giant's crown. This realization adds a sense of urgency and fragility to the beauty we observe, as it implies the rings are a transient masterpiece rather than a permanent feature. The dirtying of the ice is a clock that is slowly ticking toward a time when the rings may be too dark to shine. It forces us to appreciate the current era of brilliant pastel gradients as a unique and fleeting moment in the life of the gas giant. This chemical age tells a story of creation and eventual disappearance, a reminder of the impermanence of all things in the cosmos. As you consider this long-term measurement of time, feel the steady, grounded nature of your own physical presence in this moment. The slow accumulation of dust is a rhythm so deep it is almost impossible to feel, yet it dictates the fate of millions of miles of ice. You are currently witnessing a system in its prime, a perfect balance of purity and exposure that will never be quite the same again. Let the slow ticking of this cosmic clock bring you into a state of present moment awareness and peace. Different regions of the rings reflect radar uniquely, allowing us to map the varying roughness and density of the particles across the silent bands. By bouncing radio waves off the frozen quarry, we can see the texture of the ice boulders in ways that visible light cannot reveal. This radar mapping shows that some rings are composed of smooth, marble-like spheres, while others are jagged, porous collections of shattered frost. It reveals a hidden topography of texture that defines the character of the light we see. This structural data provides another layer to our understanding of the symphony of colours, as the physical shape of the particles influences how they scatter and absorb light. The roughness of the surface can create micro-shadows that deepen the colours, while a smooth, glassy finish can produce a more brilliant and pure reflection. It is a hidden world of varying textures that defines the visual character of every individual ringlet, from the densest bands to the thinnest gaps. This map of roughness is a record of the physical forces that have shaped the ice over aeons. If we were to look closer, we would find a world that is as much about touch and texture as it is about light and colour. We can distinguish between a lane of fluffy, snow-like aggregates and a region of dense, solid ice through the way they interact with these invisible waves. It is a testament to our ingenuity that we can reach out across the void to feel the surface of a ring millions of miles away. This structural mapping completes the visual picture, adding a sense of physical weight and presence to the shimmering gradients of the crown. Ultimately, this subtle chromatic variation turns the rings into a vast, frozen record of the solar system's deep chemical history, preserved in a state of cryogenic perfection. every molecule of tholin, every speck of iron oxide, and every grain of carbon dust is a data point in a grand multi-billion-year ledger. By studying the symphony of colours, we're not just looking at a beautiful sight. We're reading the chemical biography of our celestial neighbourhood. It is a profound synthesis of physics, chemistry, and history, all manifesting as a gentle gradient of pastel pink and ivory. The rings act as a giant collector, trapping and holding the remnants of ancient moons, passing comets, and the primordial nebula from which the planets were born. This chemical archive is held in a delicate orbital suspension, waiting for us to decipher its secrets through the language of light and colour. It is a masterpiece of preservation, where the deep cold of the outer void keeps the record clean and intact for millions of years. The colours we see are the signatures of ancient events, frozen in time and circling the gas giant in perfect synchronised harmony. The great rain, sensory focus, the silent invisible drift of microscopic snowflakes falling eternally into a sea of clouds. This synchronised harmony, while seemingly eternal, masks a profound and active dissolution occurring at the system's heart. The innermost edge of the rings is not a static or rigid boundary, but rather a transitional zone of active material exchange with the massive gas giant below. Here, the crystalline order of the orbiting bands begins to soften and fray as the physical proximity to the planet's immense influence takes hold. If we were to look closer at this border, the clean lines of the inner tracks give way to a hazy interactive mist where the distinction between ring and planet blurs. This region functions as a bridge, a place where the orbital momentum of the ice finally yields to the overwhelming gravitational desire of the world it surrounds. It is a restless, shifting frontier that hums with the energy of particles, preparing to make their final downward journey. The stillness of the deep void is replaced here by a sense of movement and inevitability, a slow-motion unravelling of the grand architecture. Every grain of ice in this sector is a traveller at the end of a long journey, standing on the threshold of a new existence within the atmosphere. This transitional zone is the vital link in a planetary life cycle, where the frozen past begins to merge with a churning gaseous future. Deep within this turbulent frontier, the silence is punctuated by the invisible tug of electromagnetic power. Microscopic grains of ice and dust are drawn away from their orbital paths, caught in the invisible grip of the planet's magnetic field lines. These tiny travellers are guided in a long, elegant arc, gracefully falling into the upper atmosphere like a silent, endless drift of frozen dust. This magnetic steering act ensures that the descent is not a chaotic tumble, but an organised migration along specific, invisible pathways. The field lines act as celestial chutes, funneling the smallest particles toward the high-altitude cloud decks with a precision that defies the vacuum. It is a mesmerising sight to consider these billions of icy specks being steered by the planet's heartbeat, surrendering their orbital speed for a guided path home. Remarkably, the universe has designed a system where even the smallest fragments of the crown are given a structured passage into the depths of the planet. This drift is completely invisible to the naked eye, a secret motion occurring across millions of miles of empty space. As they fall, they catch the light of the distant sun one last time, a final glimmer of frost before they vanish into the golden haze. Surprisingly, the magnitude of this invisible migration is staggering when measured against our terrestrial scales. This phenomenon, famously known as ring rain, transfers an estimated 10,000 kilograms of delicate frozen material to the planet every single second of every single day. If we were to watch this from within the cloud tops, it would appear as an unending blizzard of microscopic snowflakes descending eternally from a crystal sky. This massive influx of water ice represents a relentless transformation of the planet's upper reaches, a literal watering of the gas giant from the heavens above. The volume is so immense that it could fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool in less than a minute, yet it falls with such a soft, imperceptible touch that the atmosphere below remains seemingly undisturbed. It is a heavy, persistent rain that has no clouds and makes no sound, a silent flooding of the sky. This sensory focus on the silent, invisible drift of microscopic snowflakes provides a window into the sheer scale of the interaction between Saturn and its rings. The mass of the falling frost is a reminder of the raw power contained within the orbiting disk, even as it slowly evaporates. It is a quiet, heavy redistribution of matter that has been occurring for millions of years, slowly reshaping the chemical identity of the world below. The relentless influx of this ancient water subtly alters the chemical composition of Saturn's ionosphere, creating a unique atmospheric signature. This structure of celestial irrigation results in the formation of darkened bands that softly parallel the equator, visible in specific wavelengths of light. It is as if the planet is being tattooed by its own crown, the falling ice leaving a permanent shadow on the golden clouds below. These darkened regions are areas where the high concentration of water suppresses the density of the surrounding plasma, cooling the local environment of the upper atmosphere. This cooling effect changes how the planet reflects light, creating a banded texture that mirrors the structure of the rings themselves on the face of the world. It is a stunning visual confirmation of the deep connection between the orbiting ice and the gaseous giant, a physical reflection of the heavens upon the Earth. If we were to look closer, these ionospheric shadows would reveal themselves as a map of the ring's most active and eroding sectors. The planet becomes a canvas upon which the rings write their own history, a ledger of mass and movement recorded in the changing chemistry of the air. This process turns the planet into a reflection of its most beautiful feature, forever marked by the gift of falling ice. If we were to look closer at the invisible fabric of the atmosphere, we would see how charged particles liberated from the rings do more than just add mass. These microscopic invaders interact with the ionospheric plasma, acting as resistors and conductors that fundamentally redirect the global electrical pathways high in the planet's upper atmosphere. If we could see these currents, they would appear as shimmering, shifting rivers of energy, responding to the rhythmic arrival of the icy rain. This electrical interference creates a dynamic, invisible weather system that pulses with the heartbeat of the ring system's internal motion. The interaction between the falling ice and the planet's magnetic environment generates a low-frequency hum of energy that vibrates through the upper reaches of the world. It is a hidden symphony of electricity, a circuit that connects the farthest reaches of the A-ring to the deepest layers of the Saturnian storm clouds. Allow your breathing to remain slow and steady, noticing the quiet weight of your limbs as you consider these vast invisible currents. Just as these electrical rivers find their path through the atmosphere, feel the steady flow of relaxation moving through your own body, grounding you in this peaceful moment. You are a part of a wider energetic landscape, one that is as balanced and orderly as the electrical heartbeat of a giant world. A profound sense of impermanence arises as this continuous quiet loss of mass suggests that the inner rings are not a permanent feature, but are slowly eroding over immense geological timescales. Bit by bit, the majestic architecture is being dismantled from the inside out, its substance surrendered to the insatiable pull of the world it orbits. It is a slow-motion sunset for the inner bands, a process of thinning that will eventually leave the planet's closest reaches empty and dark. The realization that the rings are actively disappearing changes our perspective from viewing them as a static monument to seeing them as a fleeting performance. Every second of the ring reign is a countdown, a measurable decay that dictates the lifespan of one of the universe's most spectacular sights. While they appear solid and eternal to us, they are in reality a delicate and temporary gift, slowly being reclaimed by the planet that once held them aloft. Looking beyond the water ice, complex organic compounds, the same reddish tholins that tint the outer reaches, are also part of this downward migration. These falling compounds act as cosmic seeds, drifting into the churning atmosphere to mix with the native gases in a slow, chemical union that contributes to the rich and varied chemistry of Saturn's upper clouds. The the planet's storms and winds are essentially fed by the debris of its own rings, creating a weather system that is partially fueled from space. This organic rain introduces a complexity to the planet's chemistry that would not exist in isolation, linking the deep history of the rings to the daily weather of the world. The reddish hues we see in the rings are literally falling into the golden clouds, perhaps contributing to the subtle colour variations in the planet's own belts and zones. It is a remarkable recycling of material, where the debris of ancient moons becomes the building blocks of modern atmospheric storms. Remarkably, the universe has created a system where the planet is constantly being nourished by its own orbiting crown. This influx of carbon-rich material acts as a fertilizer for the complex chemical reactions occurring in the heat and pressure of the lower atmosphere. It is a profound realization that the beauty of the rings is being physically absorbed, turning the planet into a living vessel for the memories of the ice. The exact mechanism driving this relentless rain is a delicate, ongoing balance between the relentless pull of gravity tugging inward and the resilient magnetic forces pushing outward. It is a state of perpetual tension, where every grain of ice exists in a tug-of-war between two of the universe's most fundamental powers. This invisible struggle dictates the pace of the descent, ensuring that the union between the planet and the rings is a slow, graceful process rather than a sudden collapse. Gravity seeks to bring the ice home to the planet's core, while the magnetic field attempts to hold it in a rigid orbital suspension. The result is this fine, mist-like rain that bypasses the centrifugal stability of the larger boulders, selecting only the smallest and most susceptible grains for the journey. It is a cosmic sorting machine that chooses only the most delicate snowflakes to serve as messengers of the rings. This structural shift in our understanding, born from observations of this slow material transfer, has fundamentally changed how we view the age and evolution of planetary rings. We used to view these structures as static remnants of creation, but the discovery of the ring rain proves they are dynamic, transient, and perhaps much younger than the planet itself. The very fact of their dissolution is what allows us to calculate their lifespan, turning the falling ice into a cosmic hourglass. This knowledge shifts our focus from the origin of the rings to their eventual end, highlighting the impermanence of even the largest celestial structures. It suggests that we are living in a privileged window of time, a golden age where the rings are at their peak of visibility and mass before the rain consumes them. The science of the ring rain is thus a science of time, a way to measure the pulse of a planetary system through the rate of its decay. If we were to look closer at the data, we would see that the rings are a feature of change rather than stability. They are a phase, a spectacular but temporary ornament that the planet wears for a fraction of its long life. This realization adds a layer of poignant beauty to the sight, knowing that we are witnesses to a process of magnificent slow-motion disappearance. Ultimately, this constant gentle descent represents an endless union between the gas giant and its glorious fading crown. The rings are not merely orbiting the planet, they are becoming part of it, one microscopic snowflake at a time. It is a beautiful and quiet closing of a circle, a reminder that in the cosmos, the end of one form is often the beginning of another in a sea of eternal change. The planet and its rings are not two separate entities, but a single, integrated system that is constantly exchanging energy and matter. This union is the final act of the grand architecture, a slow merge that ensures the legacy of the ice will live on within the heart of the world itself. The ring rain is the bridge that makes this connection possible, a silent, invisible drift that ties the heavens to the earth in a bond of gravity and light. This final image of the snowflakes falling eternally into a sea of clouds provides a sense of profound closure and peace. It is the natural conclusion to a journey of orbital splendor, a return to the source that is as graceful as the rings themselves. As the ice vanishes into the clouds, it leaves behind a legacy of beauty that is forever etched into the identity of the gas giant. This legacy of beauty, so deeply etched into the gas giant's identity, carries with it a mystery that spans the entire history of our solar system. The true age of these shimmering bands remains a topic of intense scientific debate, a cosmic puzzle that balances precariously between ancient planetary origins and a relatively modern creation. Like an ancient absolute stillness of a shattered crystal, suspended flawlessly in a block of clear resin, the rings hold their secrets in a frozen suspension that defies easy categorization. Some see them as primordial witnesses to the birth of the sun, while others view them as a fleeting ornament added only recently to the planet's crown. This fundamental question of timing shapes every theory we hold about the evolution of the outer planets and the potential for life within their icy moons. It is a debate that forces us to reconcile the seemingly eternal nature of the rings with the measurable decay of their falling ice. As we peer into this crystalline history, we find ourselves caught between two vastly different scales of existence. One path leads back to the very dawn of time, while the other suggests a sudden and spectacular event that occurred while our own world was already ancient. This tension creates a profound sense of wonder, making every observation of the rings a search for the fingerprints of the past. Deep within the foundations of planetary science, some evidence suggests that these rings formed billions of years ago, alongside the gas giant itself, remaining as leftover, tranquil construction material from the birth of the solar system. In this ancient vision, the rings are the unformed remnants of the primordial nebula, a disk of ice and dust that never quite coalesced into a moon. They have circled the planet since the very beginning, surviving for 4 billion years in a state of quiet orbital equilibrium. This perspective treats the rings as a fundamental part of the planet's anatomy, an original feature of the landscape that has witnessed the entire drama of the system's formation. Such a history would make the rings one of the oldest structures in the solar system, a survivor of the chaotic early era when the planets were still finding their places. The sheer resilience required for such a structure to endure for aeons adds a layer of stoic majesty to the glowing frost. Imagine the patience of these particles, orbiting in the dark for billions of years, while empires rose and fell on the distant inner planets. They are the silent archives of the solar system's childhood, preserving the chemical signatures of a time before the sun had even settled into its current life. This ancient origin story gives the rings a weight and a permanence that grounds their ethereal beauty in the bedrock of deep time. Surprisingly, the universe often favours the sudden and the spectacular over the slow and the steady, leading to contrasting theories that propose the rings are remarkably young. In this version of the story, the grand architecture we see today might have formed only 100 million years ago, a time when dinosaurs were still the undisputed masters of the Earth. To a planet that has existed for billions of years, 100 million years is but a brief and recent season, a late arrival decoration in a long and varied life. This theory of youth transforms our understanding of the rings into a lucky coincidence, a temporary masterpiece that we happen to be witnessing during a short window of cosmic time. If this is true, the night sky looked vastly different for the majority of Saturn's existence, lacking the brilliant wide crown that defines it now. It is a staggering thought that such a massive and complex structure could be a relatively new addition to the celestial neighbourhood. By embracing this shorter timeline, we begin to see the rings as a dynamic and perhaps fleeting event rather than an eternal landmark. They become a spectacular celebration of a specific moment in the life of a world, a flash of brilliance in the dark. This perspective adds a sense of urgency to our study, making the rings a precious and time-sensitive gift from the cosmos. If we were to look closer at the mechanics of such a recent arrival, a likely scenario for a young origin involves the catastrophic destruction of a large icy moon drawn too close to the planet's immense gravity. This ill-fated world would have been a massive body of rock and ice, orbiting peacefully until its path drifted toward the invisible boundary where the planet's tidal forces become irresistible. Known as the Roche limit, this threshold marks the point where the gravity of the host planet overcomes the internal gravity holding a moon together. The resulting drama would have been a silent gargantuan event, as the moon was slowly but surely dismantled by the relentless pull of the gas giant. It represents a moment of extreme transition where a solid world was unmade to provide the raw material for a sprawling disk of light. This act of celestial demolition is the violent precursor to the tranquil order we observe in the present day. Notice the profound silence of this destruction, occurring in the airless void without a single sound to mark the passing of a world. The fragments of that lost moon now form the very bands we admire, their history hidden within the shimmer of the ice. This scenario turns the rings into a beautiful memorial, a shimmering record of a moon that was physically transformed by the weight of the planet's gaze. This structure of destruction was not a chaotic explosion, but a meticulous and silent shredding of the moon's very foundations by the planet's tidal forces. As the moon crossed the threshold, the side closest to the planet felt a pull significantly stronger than the side facing away, stretching the world into an elongated shape before finally tearing it apart. The moon's icy mantle would have been stripped away in massive frozen sheets, spreading outward to form the spectacular glowing disk of the rings. Meanwhile, the denser, rocky core of the victim would have been pulled inward, eventually being swallowed by the planet's churning atmosphere or shattered into the inner ringlets. This separation of ice from stone is what created the nearly pure water ice composition that defines the rings today. It was a cosmic filtration process, leaving behind only the lightest and most reflective material to orbit in a permanent shimmering dance. Take a moment to let your body settle into the quiet support of your surroundings, feeling a sense of deep grounding as you consider this ancient separation. Just as the rock fell away to leave only the light, feel any heavy thoughts drift away, leaving only a sense of clarity and focus. You're observing the aftermath of a great winnowing, where the universe chose only the most brilliant fragments to remain in the sky. In the alternative histories of the system, another possibility exists in the form of a massive collision between two ancient moons, or a wandering comet from the outer void. Such an impact would have released a staggering amount of energy, shattering the involved bodies into a spectacular chaotic debris field that eventually flattened out under the influence of gravity and collisions. Unlike the slow shredding of tidal forces, this was a sudden and violent birth, a flash of destruction that populated the orbital plane with trillions of fresh, jagged fragments. Over time, the erratic paths of the debris would have been smoothed out by the relentless mathematics of the planet's spin, coalescing into the orderly circular bands we see today. This theory explains the presence of the rings as the result of a rare and catastrophic accident, a localized apocalypse that left a beautiful and lasting scar in the sky. It reminds us that the most serene sights in the heavens are often the products of incredible violence and chance. Consider the magnitude of such a collision, a moment where the silence of space was shattered by the meeting of two mountain-sized worlds. The resulting cloud of ice and dust eventually cooled and settled, forming the crystalline record that now circles the planet. This origin story highlights the chaotic and unpredictable nature of the cosmos, where beauty is often born from the wreckage of disaster. Such a display of light and purity strongly argues for a young age, as the pristine, bright nature of the ice is difficult to reconcile with billions of years of exposure. If the rings were truly ancient, they should have been blackened and dulled by billions of years of accumulating cosmic dust and meteoroid soot, much like a snowbank at the edge of a busy highway. Instead, the ice remains extraordinarily reflective, a sparkling testament to its own apparent youth and lack of environmental pollution. The high albedo of the rings suggests that they have not yet had enough time to be thoroughly dirtied by the dark debris that drifts through the outer solar system. For scientists who favour a modern origin, this brilliance is the visual proof that we are looking at a relatively new and unblemished addition to the planet. It is a compelling case for a system that was born recently enough to retain its original, snowy lustre and crystal clarity. If we were to look closer, we would see that the ice is remarkably free of the grit and carbon that characterises almost every other ancient surface in the solar system. This cleanliness is a powerful indicator of time, a chemical signature that whispers of a beginning that occurred just yesterday in geological terms. Every brilliant reflection is a challenge to the idea of an ancient, dusty past, favouring instead a fresh and vibrant present that still shines with the fire of its creation. Yet the sheer scale of the system provides a counter-argument that allows for an ancient origin despite the ring's brilliant appearance. Because the mass of the rings is so incredibly great, it is possible that the system has enough internal volume to absorb tiny meteoroid impacts and remain sparkling bright for a very long time. In this view, the constant collisions and grinding of the ice boulders act as a self-cleaning mechanism, burying dark contaminants deep within the fragments and keeping fresh ice on the surface. The rings could be ancient veterans that simply possess a massive built-in resilience to the aging effects of space. This theory suggests that we cannot judge the age of a ring by its colour alone, as the massive volume of ice acts as a buffer against the passage of time. It allows for a history where the rings are as old as the sun, having found a way to maintain their youthful glow through sheer, overwhelming bulk. Notice the strength in this idea, a sense of endurance that defies the simple erosion of the years. The rings become a fortress of ice, protecting their own brilliance through a constant internal renewal of their frozen surfaces. This perspective gives the system a profound sense of permanence, a structure that has mastered the art of staying young by constantly remaking itself from within. Looking upon the life cycle of this orbital masterpiece, it is entirely possible that the rings are a dynamic, breathing system that has been destroyed and reformed multiple times throughout history. In this rhythmic vision, the current rings are just the latest version of a structure that the planet has worn, lost and reclaimed in a cycle spanning billions of years. When moons collide or stray too close, new rings are born. When the ring rain and tidal forces prevail, they slowly fade away. This perspective treats the rings not as a single event, but as a repeating process, a seasonal ornament of the gas giant that appears and disappears over geological epochs. It reconciles the evidence for both youth and age, suggesting that the material is ancient but the current arrangement is relatively new. We are witnessing one pulse in a long, slow planetary heartbeat, a single breath in the life of a world that is constantly remaking itself to suit the changing tides of the cosmos. Feel the steady rhythm of your own breath, a quiet cycle of renewal that mirrors this gargantuan planetary process of inhalation and exhalation. Just as you breathe in and out, the planet breathes its rings in and out over millions of years, a constant exchange of matter and energy. This dynamic history turns the rings into a living, evolving part of the planet's story, a feature that is never truly finished but always in a state of becoming. Within each fragment of this icy crown, the particles we observe today hold a frozen memory of a violent past miraculously transformed into a tranquil, orderly present. Every snowflake and mountain-sized boulder is a remnant of a world that was torn apart or a collision that shook the foundations of the system. This frozen quarry is a museum of catastrophes, where the wreckage of the past has been repurposed into the most beautiful architecture in the solar system. The absolute stillness we see from a distance is a hard-won peace, a state of equilibrium achieved after the chaotic energy of the ring's birth finally settled into a rhythmic circular flow. It is a profound realization that the serenity of the rings is built upon the ruins of what came before, a masterpiece of recycling that spans millions of miles of empty space. As you reflect on this transformation, allow a sense of profound calm to wash over you, recognizing that even the greatest upheavals eventually find their way to order. This transition from violence to tranquility is the ultimate story of the rings, a narrative of redemption written in the language of ice and light. It reminds us that even the most shattered things can be rearranged into a state of flawless, shimmering perfection that catches the gaze of an entire galaxy. You're resting at the end of a long and turbulent history, looking out upon a world that has finally found its quiet, eternal balance after aeons of searching for the light. Searching for the light, one eventually realizes that the pristine architecture we see today is merely a single, fleeting frame in a remarkably long and slow cosmic film. This frozen masterpiece, which feels like a permanent monument to our brief human lives, is actually caught in a state of high-speed transition when viewed against the vast, stretching timelines of the galaxy. If we could accelerate the passage of the centuries, we would see the rings ripple, expand and contract like a living, breathing creature made of light and ice. They are not a static object, but a dynamic event that is currently unfolding in a slow-motion dance across the dark void. The grand architecture is a snapshot of a larger story, a momentary alignment of trillions of individual lives that have come together for a brief season of brilliance. This realization changes the way we look at the ice, turning it from a solid structure into a fluid, evolving performance. We are catching the rings in the middle of a sentence, a single word in a cosmic dialogue that has been whispered since the dawn of the system. The beauty we observe is a temporary harmony, a coincidence of physics and time that will eventually dissolve back into the silence of the night. It is a cinematic phenomenon, where we are the lucky audience for a few frames of an eternal epic. Surprisingly, the universe has provided a silent mechanism for the eventual departure of this crown through the relentless process of ring rain. The continuous loss of material to the planet suggests that the main rings may only have a few 100 million years left before they vanish entirely into the golden haze. Every second, 10,000 kilograms of history are surrendered to the atmosphere, a steady and measurable subtraction from the total mass of the system. This span of time may seem incomprehensibly vast to us, but on the scale of a planet that has lived for billions of years, it is a brief and poignant afternoon. The rings are essentially an hourglass that has already been turned over, with the last grains of frost slowly falling toward the bottom. This quiet erasure is not a tragedy, but a natural progression of the system's life cycle. The knowledge that they have an expiration date adds a layer of depth to their beauty, making the current moment of brilliance even more significant. They are a treasure that the planet is slowly and gracefully reclaiming, one microscopic snowflake at a time. The impending silence makes the current melody of the ice feel even more profound. Notice the way your body rests in perfect stillness, much like the ice boulders that are currently held in a delicate shifting equilibrium. Over time, the inner rings will likely thin out entirely as they are softly consumed by the planet's insatiable gravity. The D-ring, already a ghostly and tenuous veil, is the first to feel the heavy hand of the giant pulling its substance downward. As this innermost frontier dissolves, the gap between the planet's clouds and the main bands will slowly grow, creating a wide and empty void. This process is a gentle, almost meditative dismantling of the architecture from the inside out. The particles that once formed the closest lanes of traffic are now being welcomed into the warmer, higher pressure environment of the gas giant's heart. This transition represents a shift in identity, as the orbiting ice becomes part of the planet's internal weather and chemistry. The thinning of the inner lanes is the first verse of the system's eventual exit, a quiet surrender that begins at the very centre of the crown. It is the slow, peaceful fading of a beautiful melody into the quiet expanse of the night. If we were to look closer at the outer boundaries of the system, we would find that the rings are not just falling inward, but also reaching outward into the dark. These distant reaches may slowly drift away, their material clumping together in the dark to form new, tiny icy moons that will orbit the planet in solitary silence. This represents a beautiful and creative transformation, where the scattered fragments of a former moon are recycled into a new generation of solid worlds. Instead of being consumed by the planet, these particles are seeking their own independence, clustering together under the influence of their own minuscule gravity. It is a second birth for the ice, a transition from the collective shimmer of the disk to the singular existence of a satellite. These new moons will be the keepers of the ring's legacy, carrying the ancient water of the system into the deep future. The outward migration is a peaceful dispersal, a scattering of seeds that will eventually take root in the dark void far beyond the main architecture. It ensures that even when the rings are gone, their substance will remain as a scattered family of frozen worlds. The melody of the rings thus finds a new life in the silent orbiting spheres of the outer reaches. Deep within the outermost strands of the main system, the dynamic F-ring continues to twist and fray, its chaotic nature providing a gentle preview of the system's eventual unravelling. The braided ribbons of ice are already showing the signs of a structure that is losing its battle with the disruptive forces of the nearby moons. This narrow and restless band is a visual manifestation of transition, a shimmering cord that is being slowly pulled apart by the invisible fingers of gravity. Watching its constant, flickering changes is like listening to a melody that has begun to lose its tempo, its notes scattering into the quiet expanse of the night. The F-ring represents the leading edge of the system's decay, a place where the order of the inner tracks is replaced by a shimmering, beautiful entropy. Its instability is not a flaw, but a characteristic of its place at the edge of the dark, where the rules of the disk are most fragile. It serves as a reminder that all grand designs eventually find their way back to a state of wild and unconfined movement. The fraying of the braid is the slow-motion beginning of the end, a graceful loss of shape that signals the wider system's future. It is the first note of the final movement, echoing through the empty spaces of the solar system. If we could peer into the deep future of the solar system, we would see how civilizations that might arise on distant worlds could look upon a ringless Saturn with only a collection of bright icy moons remaining as evidence. For these distant observers, the planet would be a clean, unadorned sphere of gold and shadow, its iconic crown reduced to a set of gravitational equations and ancient footprints. They will study the orbital paths of the moons and wonder about the era of light that once spanned the gaps between them. The rings will be a mythical legend, a legendary period of planetary artistry that existed long before their telescopes were even built. This perspective reminds us that we are living in a specific and extraordinary moment of history, a time when the planet wears its most spectacular identity. The absence of the rings in the future makes their presence today feel like a profound and localized miracle. They are a temporary bridge across the void, a structure of light that will one day be nothing more than a memory held by the distant stars. To those future eyes, Saturn will still be beautiful, but it will be a beauty defined by silence rather than song. The rings will have faded back into the expanse of the night, leaving only the moons to tell their story. Notice the steady and rhythmic expansion of your lungs, a cycle of intake and release that mirrors the potential for renewal within the planetary system. Conversely, the universe is a place of endless second acts, and new collisions in the distant future could inject fresh material into the system, temporarily rejuvenating its spectacular brilliance. A stray comet from the outer Oort cloud or a wandering moonlet could be shattered in a single silent instant, replenishing the faded tracks with a fresh supply of pristine white ice. This injection of new material would ignite the rings once more, creating a temporary flare of luminosity that would last for millions of years. It is a cycle of destruction and rebirth that suggests the system is never truly finished, but is always waiting for its next inspiration. These rare and violent events are the heartbeat of the system's longevity, a way to refresh the frozen quarry when it has begun to dim. The grand architecture is thus a living thing, capable of being remade and reborn from the wreckage of the deep past. It ensures that the melody of the rings, though it may fade, has the potential to be struck again by a passing hand. Even in the depths of the night, the potential for a new dawn remains hidden in the dark. This structure of reality reminds us that our present era represents an incredibly fortunate window of time where the rings are at their most extensive, complex and beautiful. We are the witnesses to a peak of planetary artistry, observing a moment when the balance of ice, light and gravity has reached its most sophisticated expression. The rings we see are not just any rings. They are the most magnificent and well-organised bands that have ever circled the gas giant. We have arrived on the scene during a golden age, a brief interval between the chaotic birth of the system and its eventual quiet dissolution. If we had been born a billion years earlier or a billion years later, the view would have been vastly different and likely far less spectacular. This realization turns every observation of the rings into an act of gratitude, a recognition of the rare privilege of being here at exactly the right time. The grand architecture is a gift from the cosmic calendar, a performance that is happening right now specifically for those who care to look. It is a singular alignment of beauty and awareness in the middle of a vast and lonely universe. We're hearing the melody at its loudest and most clear before it begins to fade into the quiet expanse. Deep within the heart of our appreciation, the knowledge of their impermanence makes their current tranquil beauty all the more profound and deeply precious to observe. Like the slow, peaceful fading of a beautiful melody into the quiet expanse of the night, the rings gain their true meaning from the silence that will eventually follow. The fact that they will one day vanish gives every shimmer of light on the frost a sense of weight and importance that it would not otherwise possess. We are watching a world that is passing away even as it shines, a masterpiece that is being erased as it is being viewed. This fragility is what allows the rings to touch us so deeply, speaking to our own understanding of life's fleeting and precious nature. The ice is a mirror for our own journey, a shimmering reminder that the most beautiful things are often the most temporary. By embracing the impermanence of the system, we find a deeper peace in its current state of frozen perfection. Every moment of observation is a sacred encounter with a beauty that will never be repeated in exactly the same way again. The melody is all the sweeter because we know it must eventually end, leaving us in the profound quiet of the stars. Ultimately, the rings stand as a silent testament to the idea that even the most massive and seemingly eternal structures in space are fundamentally fleeting. They prove that the universe is not a collection of static monuments, but a series of transitions and transformations occurring over immense scales. Even a crown made of trillions of tons of ice, spanning millions of miles of space, is a temporary arrangement of matter and energy. This realization brings a sense of profound closure to our journey, a final understanding of the rings as a process rather than a thing. They are a visual representation of the law of change, a shimmering proof that everything in the cosmos is in a state of becoming or passing away. As the ice continues its slow, rhythmic dance toward the dark, it leaves us with a sense of peace and integration with the wider story of the universe. We have been part of the song, witnesses to a magnificent melody that was played in the silence of the void for a brief and beautiful season. The grand architecture of Saturn is a reminder to cherish the light while it remains, for even the stars themselves are but a single frame in the long film of eternity. Our journey ends in the quiet expanse of the night, where the memory of the light remains. The rings of Saturn are not a static monument, but a breathtaking temporary river of ice that proves perfection in the universe is a beautiful, ongoing process rather than a permanent state. The rings of Saturn are not a static monument, but a breathtaking temporary river of ice that proves perfection in the universe is a beautiful, ongoing process rather than a permanent state. This realization brings our journey through the grand architecture to its natural, quiet conclusion. Every grain of frost we have followed has shown us that even the most magnificent structures are caught in a cycle of movement and change. This perspective allows us to see the entire system as a living, breathing harmony. Trillions of individual icy fragments are currently orbiting in a state of absolute effortless balance. They are at rest in their motion, and you are invited to join them in this profound stillness. As the light of the distant sun fades into a memory, your own journey begins to settle into the quiet of the present moment. Notice the heavy, warm sensation in your toes, as if they are sinking into a soft, dark cloud of comfort. This relaxation moves slowly upward, drifting through the arches of your feet and into the centers of your ankles. Every muscle in your calves and shins begins to let go, surrendering its weight to the steady support beneath you. If we were to look closer, we would see your knees and thighs softening, releasing the last remnants of the day's movement. The heavy, grounding peace now flows into your hips and lower back, anchoring you deeply into the surface where you rest. Surprisingly, your torso feels lighter with every steady breath, as the rhythm of your heart slows to match the quiet pulse of the room. Your fingers and palms are resting open and still, completely detached from any task or effort. This quiet room holds you in a safe and silent embrace as the relaxation reaches the tops of your shoulders. All the tension in your neck melts away, leaving your head to rest perfectly and weightlessly against the pillow. Your jaw softens, and the small muscles around your eyes find a state of total, unburdened repose. A soft and steady warmth now fills the area where you lie, a gentle weight that feels like a thick hand-woven blanket of peace. The air in the room is cool and still, providing a perfect contrast to the heavy comfort of your limbs. Every breath you take is a slow, rhythmic tide that brings more stillness into your mind and body. This bed is a sanctuary of absolute quiet, a place where time has slowed to a simple, repeating pulse. You're submerged in a profound and healing darkness that knows exactly how to mend your spirit. The steady rise and fall of your chest is the only movement in this temple of quiet. It is a slow and beautiful melody that lulls you deeper and deeper into the night. Your consciousness is fading into a soft velvet fog where thoughts become as light as air. You're sinking, drifting, and letting go of the day entirely. And now 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.